This is Kicking with the Rickens, redefining retirement. I'm your co-host, Doug Turnbull here, joined normally by Heidi Ricken, Provost, investment advisor representative at Ricken Financial, and of course, licensed insurance professional, Gerry Ricken. Pa, how you doing, sir? And aren't you proud of your daughter today?
You know, I certainly am, Doug. I'm proud of all of our children, but Heidi in particular today, because she's not with us right now because she is speaking at the world's premier, the world's largest financial advisor conference for women in Boston, Massachusetts. She had the honor of speaking at that conference. So that's where she is this week.
Investing in women there. She's there at the same time as the Boston Marathon, too. And I think in some ways more impressive to be a woman excelling in this industry because it's largely been dominated by men. And in fact, in our past two episodes, we talked about index universal life insurance. We also talked about 6 steps that women should plan for in retirement planning. That's an episode Heidi did on her own because there's things like,
that's right.
Oh, I've been a stay-at-home mom all these years, or, oh, I have this burden, or there's certain stats that say women live longer or live without this. There's so many things to consider, so be sure to check those out on Apple and Spotify, and I'm sure she'll be covering some of those things, Gerry, in the conference too.
Oh, I'm sure she will, and she's excited to be at the conference and talking to people that are similar to her in the industry, because as you said, most of the industry is dominated by men, so she's changing that landscape.
Oh, for sure, and you could attest to that because she dominates you around the office. She is making sure, telling you everything to do, right? So
she is my boss. She's my boss, and I have another one at home too. So I have bosses wherever I go.
As do I at home, and I'm so thankful to God for Momo too. Well, look, we told you it was on the past episodes. We definitely think this season here is we're basically recording these shows right at the end of tax prep season. We just did a multi-part series. I think it was a 6-part series on all these different tax diversification strategies. So again, check all those out on not only Apple and Spotify, but also on the podcast tab at rickenfinancial.com and on the Ricken Financial YouTube page. And Gerry, with all the volatility in the market, before we get to the big topic du jour today, it made you think this springtime about something your family's been doing outside for years.
Oh, Doug, this time of year, I always think about gardening because my parents were big gardeners, my dad in particular. Growing up as a farmer and having that as part of his career, he always wanted to raise things. And it was out of necessity a lot of times because he was a child of the Depression. So they raised a lot of vegetables. They raised their own cattle. They raised their own hogs. They did all those things, butchered and all that. So I grew up in that environment. And when I was a kid, we were tasked with helping Dad with the garden. And helping Dad with the garden wasn't a small thing. It was a very large thing because there were several acres of vegetable garden that we would put out every year. So we raised things like, tomatoes, potatoes, broccoli. He even had cauliflower. He did Brussels sprouts occasionally. He would do beans. He would do corn. He would do, lots of jalapenos, just anything you could possibly think of, lots of onions. But one year he even did peanuts. We actually tried peanuts, and that was after Jimmy Carter became president. And being a peanut farmer was the du jour that one year. But that was a short-lived thing. But primarily, it was focused on things that Mom could can or preserve for the winter, and we could live on that and eat that throughout the winter months. So when I, had my own home and my own garden, I said the first thing I'm going to do is make sure I have a garden. I have a garden at every home that I've lived in. And one of the things that I love doing is raising tomatoes because there's nothing like a good, fresh tomato right off the vine.
Absolutely.
And there is an art form and really a science in harvesting tomatoes. You don't want the tomatoes, you don't want to pick them too green. You don't want to wait until the bugs get in them and they're infested. You don't want to wait until they're rot. You don't want to wait until they dry up. And you want to nurture your plants along the way. And when I think about that, Doug, I think about investing is very similar to that, especially retirement planning.
Yes.
When you think about retirement planning, I think about tomatoes. And you're like, okay. And you're like, okay, why would you think about tomatoes? Well, there is a certain time when you pick tomatoes. When they're ripe, you pick them, you make salsa out of them, you can them, you freeze them, you eat them in a salad, you eat them, just as themselves. But there's a time to pick tomatoes, and there's a time not to pick tomatoes. You don't wait too long. You don't pick them too early. But when you harvest those tomatoes, you want to save those for the future and make sure nothing happens to them. That's what you're doing. Same thing with part of your portfolio. You want to know when the right time to harvest your tomatoes is, to harvest the gains you have, to harvest the increases you have in your portfolio and preserve those. And as you age up and get closer to your retirement years, the 10 years before and the 10 years after your retirement date, that's a sweet spot where you need to make sure you're protecting and asset allocating the way you want your desired risk to follow. So we meet with a lot of people, every day. And that's one of the things that we hone in on is what's your risk tolerance? How do you feel about loss? If the market goes down X percentage, how would you feel about that? And then we focus on how could we protect a piece of that, not the whole thing, but a piece of that. So if the market goes down, you don't suffer any losses. But when the market goes up, you get a portion of the upside. So it's an accumulation tool that doesn't lose money. And what we're talking about is using a fixed indexed annuity as our harvested tomatoes. That's what we're talking about. So let me just explain a little bit more about what a fixed indexed annuity is, because when people hear annuity, they think, oh my gosh, that's an income stream. That's something you give to the insurance company, you get income off of, and then when you die, it's gone. There are annuities like that. There are annuities that have lots of expense in them. There are annuities that are invested in the market.
Yeah.
So when the market goes down, you lose market. There are annuities designed for income. What we're talking about is a specific annuity designed for accumulation.
Right.
It doesn't have the bells and whistles in it, as it doesn't have an income stream built into it. It doesn't have those kinds of things. It's a very simplistic investment product that you can put a portion of your money in that doesn't lose any money. It loses zero. So zero is your hero in these types of investments.
Yes.
When the market goes down, it's not invested in the market, but it's tied to market performance. So you could tie it to, for instance, the S&P 500 index. That's a worldwide known index that's very accessible. And perhaps in some of these annuities, you can get maybe up to 10% annually on the upside. So if the S&P 500 goes up at least 10% in your policy year, it goes from the day you open the account to 365 days later, or 366 if we're a leap year.
Yeah.
So it's that year measuring point. You measure it by the year. If the S&P 500 goes up at least 10% in my example, then you receive 10% additional value into your interest posted to your annuity account. Then that amount locks in. Then the process starts all over for the next annual term. So it's a good way to protect and preserve some of those gains that you've had in the past. And it's a way to protect and preserve the tomato plant as well. And by the tomato plant, I mean the amount of money that you invested to begin with. Okay? Right. So you have your original principal, then you have earnings on it. When I look at it, I view the original principal as a tomato plant. You make sure that thing is protected, but all the fruit that it bears is protected as well. And that's what we use these fixed indexed annuities for. And there are hundreds of different companies that offer thousands of different fixed indexed annuities. And by working with our research team and our advanced planning team at Impact Partnership, our mothership there in Atlanta, what we do is we analyze, they analyze for us. What are the good companies out there? Because we don't work with all hundreds of companies.
Right.
We work with about 43. And those 43 have been vetted. Their financials have been vetted. How stable is the company? Sometimes people say, well, this is too good to be true. Well, I have an example of last week. I spoke with someone, and they asked me to analyze an annuity that they had been presented, a fixed indexed annuity, one of the same ones that we're talking about, built for accumulation. And I looked at it, and it said that there was a 16% bonus. Some of these have bonuses up front, and then the upside, that 10%, will be a lot less than 10%. The cap, that's called a cap.
Yeah.
It will be a lot less than that if you get the bonus up front. So you can either go in without a bonus and have a higher potential of earning that on an annual basis, or go in with a higher principal and a bonus added to your principal. Then your interest that you accumulate over the years is going to be much less because you were paid that money up front. This one had a 16% bonus on it. I started looking at it, and I compared that to one of ours that we analyzed, which is currently offering a 14% bonus. Then I looked at the amount that they could earn on an annual basis, and it was lower than our 14% offering.
Yeah.
So I talked to Jared at Impact.
Yeah, you talked to one of the analysts, yeah.
Absolutely. I said, do you know anything about this? He said, actually, we do know about that. We analyzed that company. They came to us. They wanted us to distribute that and offer it to all of our advisors like me. And we opted out of that because of the financial instability of the financial insurance company behind that.
Interesting.
I shared that with the individual who asked me, and they said, oh, my gosh, thank you so much. Because he asked me if I would invest in it, and I said I wouldn't put one penny into that because of the financial instability of the underlying institution. So you always want to make sure you're dealing with the right institutions that have the right annuities that fit your specific needs, wants, desires, and risk analysis.
And many times when I've heard annuities explained, it's been more in a general sense. I haven't really heard about the downside of even the, quote, better annuities. And the downside could be is if you take it up for a bonus with something that's a little bit less stable. And that's why you need somebody. You couldn't just go and do this on your own, or you could, but probably with less of a result, right? You really, there's no guarantee that you're ever going to get a great result, right? But you definitely need to talk to people that are looking at this all the time, strength in numbers, right?
Well, and you want to look at, you want to work with someone who looks holistically at everything, because if you just say, hey, I want to go buy an annuity, you aren't going to be working with us. If you come to us and say, hey, Gerry, I want to buy an annuity. Well, we don't know enough about what your whole financial plan is, what your tax situation is, what, if you're married, if you're single, what your goals, objectives are. Do you want to leave a legacy? We look at everything, and that's why we look at everything, Doug. And when a piece of this fits, it fits very well. When it doesn't, we don't force it. It's like putting a puzzle together, and that piece looks like it fits, but it doesn't. You're trying to force it together.
Yeah.
It never works that way. So we want to make sure that holistically we look at everything. What makes you tick? What do you thrive in? What are your risk tolerances? And we want to make sure both of you are on the same page if you're a married couple. Then we analyze, where do we think things should be repositioned and rebalanced to make those objectives work.
Right.
And, please reach out to us, because all the planning that we do up front is complimentary. We look at it because we don't know if we can help you.
Sure.
And you don't know what you don't know, and we don't know what we don't know about you. So it's sitting down with either Heidi or I and having a couple of sessions. Then we'll present everything to you. And by doing that, you'll have a good feeling and you'll be a better educated consumer, because we want our consumers, our clients, to be educated individuals who understand what we're talking about and what their options are.
For
and
sure.
You can do that by calling 314-442-6476 or hitting us up on our website at rickenfinancial.com. That's RICKEN financial.com.
At rickenfinancial.com, there's a contact us button. You can just put in your information right there, and someone will be in touch with you. And if you want to pick up the phone, leave a message or talk to someone directly, 314-442-6476. Now, another way, Gerry, before we log off here, another way that they could be in touch with you and get to meet you and Heidi in person is in an event or set of events coming up in May, correct?
Yes, we have. We typically hold events every month. We're not. We didn't do it in April because we're actually moving our offices internal to our building. So there's a lot of things going on in April. So in May, on May 20th, May 21st, we're having a couple dinner seminars. We're finalizing all the plans on that, but those dinner seminars will be focused on retirement planning, particularly tax planning. How you can structure your tax life. We talk a lot about tax preparation during April, February, March, April, but tax season is all season long.
Yeah,
for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So this is going to be about the taxes for sure. Getting ahead on some things there that you don't want to potentially miss out on May 20th and 21st. Get the details for that by calling 314-442-6476 or going to rickenfinancial.com. And Gerry's going to get that put up on the event page there and make sure everybody knows about it. Also, be sure to go to the Ricken Financial Facebook page. A lot of good content on there, including about these events and what Heidi, the Investing in Women conference that Heidi's finishing up speaking at right now. There's so much to do. So Ricken Financial's Facebook page, you can catch the podcast on YouTube and on Apple and Spotify and some of the other podcatchers. And Gerry, there's just so much going on. It never stops with you all. You're always traveling, always moving around, and now you're moving the offices within the building. So I look forward to seeing the new podcast space. The next time we record, it's going to be at a totally different studio. It's going to be great.
It'll be awesome. It'll be awesome. So we appreciate you, Doug, and we appreciate doing this and educating our clients and educating the country and the world.
Hey,
we actually have listeners around the world.
That is true. I've looked at the analytics. I've seen some pings from all over the place. So that's fantastic. So we love that for you and Heidi, Gerry. So again, be sure to subscribe. And if you know somebody that you think needs to hear this, maybe they're in super just erupt worry mode about what's going on in the market. Hey, there are a lot of things to be upset about in the market, but give a call to Gerry and Heidi and the Ricken Financial team, 314-442-6476, or just shoot the link over to them. Make sure they know about this so they can hear some advice that maybe can give them a little peace of mind. Well, Gerry, thank you so much for lending your time, and especially if we're mentioning the word volatility, we need to snap back real quick and remember, Gerry, that every day
is a holiday
and life is short.
Laugh hard.
And we'll do that here on Kicking with the Rickens, Redefining Retirement. Thanks to all of you for listening and to our producer, Brandon Benefield, for getting this published. Gerry, thanks to you for making the time today, sir.
Absolutely.
We will have another episode coming your way here shortly. I'm Doug. He's Gerry, and this has been Kicking with the Rickens, Redefining Retirement.
By contacting us, you may be provided with information about insurance products, including annuities, offered through Gerry Ricken, Missouri Insurance License, NPN number 924708. Annuity guarantees rely on the financial strength and claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company. Read your contract for restrictions, limitations, or penalties. Ricken Financial LLC is not licensed in all 50 states. To find out if Ricken Financial LLC is licensed in your state, please call 314-442-6476.